'Tis the end of the year. Humanity has been through the ringer and accomplished a lot. As we work and fulfill our responsibilities, it bears a great weight on the human soul. 'Tis now time to begin the cheer of Christmas on this time of winter solstice, to come together and bring glory to God, whether it be in person or online. To spread the holiday cheer to people of all faiths and backgrounds, let us share the true meaning of Christmas to bring great joy to others, whether it be in giving or in tidings. As we have a Merry Christmas, let that shining star in the east know no bounds. I hereby welcome you to bring you good cheer as we enter the Nerdporeal Christmas carols. As we get closer and closer to that very Christmas day, people of varying backgrounds and situations have various attitudes during this time of year. It can be joyful for some, stressful for others, and some, unfortunately, depressed and suicidal. When it comes to something as shallow as money, it stirs up a whole lot of emotions out of people with the cultural obligation of being joyful and giving during this time of year, not really helping in this situation. Sometimes even good people who sacrifice a lot throughout the course of their lives sometimes don't catch a break, and something horrible happens that can make you question ending the greatest gift of all, the gift of life. This idea was the basis of the 1943 short story titled The Greatest Gift, which was later adapted by the great filmmaker Frank Capra into the box office bomb, yet probably the Christmas movie that has best withstood the test of time. That film is the iconic and uplifting 1946 Christmas film, It's a Wonderful Life. It's a Wonderful Life begins in the town of Bedford Falls, a small town in middle America where everyone knows each other, and we see the town on a snowy Christmas Eve. People all over the town are praying for a man named George Bailey. God hears this and summons Clarence, a junior angel second class, and gives him a mission to help a discouraged man on earth who is willing to throw away God's greatest gift, his life. Clarence has only an hour to prepare, so God tasks senior angel Joseph to get Clarence acquainted with George Bailey right away, and if the mission is a success, Clarence will finally earn his wings. Hence, we, the audience, will now get acquainted with George Bailey through Clarence's eyes. We begin in 1919 with George as a young boy, sledding and sliding on ice with his friends and younger brother Harry Bailey. His brother sleds and slides too far, landing in the ice-cold water. George jumps in and saves his brother's life that day, but ends up losing his hearing in his left ear as a result. A few weeks go by and George is working at the town drugstore where we meet a young girl named Mary Hatch, who whispers in his deaf ear that she will love him for the rest of her life. Not hearing this, young George tells her his aspirations of traveling the world and learning countless new things. His boss, the druggist, Mr. Goer, is drunk and yells at George for whistling. We find out that Goer's son in college died suddenly of the influenza since the pandemic was still going on at that time. Hence, George tries to talk to him. Gower tasks him with delivering some pills, but George knows that they might have been contaminated with poison. He never delivers them and actually goes to see his father at the Bailey Building and Loan, arguing with the miserly Mr. Potter, this film's antagonist played by Lionel Barrymore. Young George sticks up for his father and berates Potter for insulting his family, and George comes back and gets smacked by Mr. Gower in his ear, causing it to bleed in a moment that used to scare me as a child, and it still unsettles me to this day. However, George has compassion and understanding for what Mr. Gower went through, and tells him about the poison. Gower realizes this and hugs George, and we learn that he has been supportive of George ever since. George saved his boss's life that day and never told a soul about the pills. We skip several years to 1928 with George now grown up and played by the great Jimmy Stewart, now getting a suitcase with his name on it as a gift from Mr. Gower, preparing for his trip across the world. He's been working for his father for 4 years now and wants to follow his aspirations now that his brother is graduating high school and can take over his job. George has a heartfelt talk with his father about what he wants to do and how he doesn't want to stay in Bedford Falls. George goes to his brother's graduation dance and runs into Mary Hatch again, the little girl from earlier, now all grown up and played by actress Donna Reed. He also runs into his old friend Sam Wainwright, who graduated from college and is going into the plastics industry. Mary and George are attracted to each other and end up falling in the pool that is underneath the floor, with everyone else jumping in as well. George walks her home after the dance and they sing "Buffalo Gals, Will You Come Out Tonight" together, cementing their attraction even further. Unfortunately, George's Uncle Billy comes by and tells him that his father just had a stroke, and they drive off. Some time goes by and we learn that Mr. Bailey has passed away, and now George is now the de facto head of the building and loan and tries to settle the family business. Potter moves to have the building and loan dissolved, but the board votes to keep it only if George stays and runs it. George ends up sacrificing his dreams of going to college and traveling the world to run it, while his brother ends up going to college instead. George hopes Harry will take over the family business when he finishes college. 4 years later, Harry finishes college and comes back home married, and we find out that he actually took a job working for his father-in-law, making George resign to working at the building and loan. He walks in town and ends up walking by Mary Hatch's house. He comes in the house and learns that she is madly in love with him. He soon realizes he is also in love, and they end up getting married in the next scene. They are on their way to their honeymoon, but they see a mob gathered outside the building and loan enacting a bank run, where many people panic and try to withdraw their money at the same time. George and Mary use their honeymoon funds to help people withdraw their money so that they can remain solvent. That night, his wife's gift to him is a rundown old home that is primed for renovation. This leads to George starting Bailey Park, a housing development that is affordable for the everyman in Bedford Falls, competing with Mr. Potter's slummy and overpriced development. Potter responds to this by calling George to his office, butters him up, and offers him a job at the competitive salary of $20,000 a year, promising business trips that will take him all over the world. George is initially tempted by this, but realizes this will do away with what he's been working towards and rebuffs Mr. Potter, who wants to turn Bedford Falls into a slummy, scummy town with vices galore. Years go by. George and Mary have children and turn their place into a quality home. A certain World War II is upon us, with everybody affected, including a majority of the men going off to war, including Ernie the taxi driver, Bert the cop, Martini the barkeep, and Harry Bailey himself, who was a war hero who saved a transport full of soldiers by shooting down 2 planes that were about to crash into them. George, because of his hearing, was not qualified to go to war, but as a quick side note, Jimmy Stewart himself was in the Air Force during World War II and was promoted all the way up to Brigadier General, staying with the military for several years while acting at the same time. We go forward to Christmas Eve in 1945. The war is over, and Harry is coming home. At the same time, a bank examiner comes in to go over the building and loans books so that they can declare $8,000. Uncle Billy goes to the bank with the $8,000 and misplaces it when he taunts Mr. Potter, dropping the money envelope into Mr. Potter's newspaper. Potter realizes this and goes full villain, knowing that in keeping the money from George, this will ruin him and get him out of the way of Mr. Potter's evil designs and machinations for Bedford Falls. Uncle Billy realizes he misplaced it and tries to backtrack to no avail, and simply cannot recall, and because of this, George enters a dark place and demeans him. He comes home and realizes that he's going to go to jail, and he starts acting abusive to his children, and starts taking his anger out by throwing stuff off the desk. His wife and children upset, Bailey leaves and immediately appeals to Potter for a loan. Potter this time rebuffs George, telling him he is worth more dead than alive due to his life insurance policy. And Mr. Potter will put out a warrant for George's arrest for misappropriation of funds. George leaves, goes to Martini's bar and drinks. A man punches George for berating his wife on the phone earlier. George wanders out into the winter and drives his car into a man's tree and gets admonished by the owner of the property. George flees on foot to the bridge and contemplates ending it all. However, another man falls into the water first and is screaming for help, prompting George to jump in and save him. They dry off in the bridge station, with Clarence introducing himself as George's guardian angel and tries to put some sense into George. George wishes he never was born, and Clarence goes ahead and grants his wish with the help of Joseph, the head angel. Now George has never been born. Nobody knows him and has never existed. He goes back to town, finds out that the car and the tree damage are gone. Martini no longer runs the bar, and the bar is no longer a friendly place to be under Nick. The druggist went to prison for putting poison in the pills. His mother doesn't recognize him and won't take him in, and reveals Uncle Billy is in a mental ward. Bedford Falls is now Pottersville, a slummy, sketchy town full of vice and riffraff. The building and loan is history. Bailey Park is now a cemetery, and we find out that Harry Bailey died as a child, and his house is the same wreck that it was when he first moved into it. George not being around did not make these things happen, and was not around to prevent other horrible things from happening. He tracks down Mary, who is now an old maid who never married, working as a librarian full-time, and she runs and screams for him, thinking he's another typical Pottersville criminal. This breaks him, and he goes back to the bridge, screaming that he wants to live. He realizes that he had been given a rare gift that gives him new insight into his situation, and that now he is incredibly cheerful and grateful that he is here, and that his family and friends in town are all waiting for him. He wishes everybody, including Mr. Potter, a Merry Christmas as he is running home through town. He gets home and is happy to see the bank examiner and the fact that he's likely going to go to jail. He reconciles with his kids, and his wife and uncle come home with a bunch of people who have rallied to help George meet the $8,000 for the bank examiner. Everyone celebrates and sings Hark the Herald Angels Sing, and the film concludes with hearing the bells on a tree, indicating that Clarence indeed received his wings. As everyone is singing Auld Lang Syne, Clarence left behind his book, The Adventures of Tom Sawyer, with a note that says, "Remember, no man is a failure who has friends." That, my friends, is the classic It's a Wonderful Life. This movie has been broadcasted every Christmas Eve on NBC ever since I was a young child. I always look forward to seeing this because of its proximity to Christmas morning and the presents I was about to receive. As an adult, I feel this movie, despite being a box office bomb when it first came out, is a significant part of American history that needs to be preserved at all costs. This movie makes you care about George Bailey, and we get to see all the things he has done for people and him sacrificing his dreams so that he can make his hometown a better place and to start a family. We see his ups and we see his downs, and especially at a critical moment in the movie when he contemplates ending it all over a measly $8,000. He gets the chance to see an alternate version of his town, Pottersville. And as a child, I was intrigued at this idea of an alternate reality long before I ever saw the Mirror Mirror episode of Star Trek or even classic Twilight Zone. George comes out a different man, and we are so uplifted by his transformation and that his hard work, his love, and his compassion and his sacrifice did pay off in the end. Watching this does hit me close to home sometimes. George and Mary singing Buffalo Gal, Will You Come Out Tonight makes me think of my maternal grandmother singing when she babysat me as a kid. And also the influenza pandemic killing the druggist's son makes me think of my mother's grandmother who passed away young in 1918 of influenza. I feel this is significant and should be cherished with all the other Christmas greats, and hope this timeless film will continue to withstand the test of time. Like George says in the movie, Merry Christmas to you all, and thank you for watching this final episode of Nerdporeal Christmas Carols. This will continue next year, so stay tuned for new videos, and may the wings of Nerdporeals carry you to a holly jolly Christmas season.